The 19-teens was a tumultuous era in American history, a time of dizzying social, political, and technological change. Trolleys, electrified streetcars, were everywhere in those days, shuttling up and down the streets of cities large and small. Since its advent in the 1890s, the electric trolley had transformed America. Gone were the days when a worker had to live within walking distance of the workplace. Now you could live 10 miles out in the country, ride the trolley into work in the pre-dawn hours, and return home at the end of your workday. Even school children became commuters, traveling by trolley from outlying areas to large centralized schools, which were quickly replacing the one-room schoolhouses of the 19th century. Shopping, going to church, and a weekend family jaunt to a picnic ground or park out in the country, these were all part of daily life in the days of trolleys. At home, new technologies were also transforming life for many Americans in the 19-teens. In that decade alone, the number of American homes with electric lights tripled, while the number with telephones quadrupled. Immigrants were streaming into America's cities in the 19-teens. They came from Europe, from Asia, from Central and South America, seeking housing, employment, and a better life for themselves and their families. Thanks largely to the influx of immigrants who were willing to work for low wages, America's industrial economy boomed in the 19-teens, but working conditions were often harsh and worker protection minimal. Under those conditions, it is no surprise that a rising tide of worker unrest kept mill workers and their employers in constant conflict. And although child labor laws had been enacted in the early 20th century, children could still be found working long hours in the most dangerous settings in the nation's mills and factories. The lives of America's women were changing dramatically as well. Once the sole domain of male workers, the nation's mills and factories were relying more and more on female workers. And women were wielding ever greater political clout, joining men in labor activism, but striking out on their own on behalf of temperance, calling on the nation to free itself from the scourge of ardent spirits. And of course, the women's suffrage movement was gaining ever wider support, but not without much conflict and controversy. Sadly, the days of trolleys would be brief, perhaps 25 years. By the mid-20s, most American families would own an automobile, and those streetcars would be replaced by autos, taxis, and buses. In Europe, a war was raging. They called it the Great War, the war to end all wars. For 3 years, President Wilson resisted getting involved, and most Americans felt similarly. But in 1917, the nation was finally drawn into that war, and young Americans shipped out by the hundreds of thousands to assist our allies, Britain, France, and Belgium, in turning back the German army. The war ended with an armistice in November 1918, and our troops, those who had survived, returned to their homes. If you find the era of the 19-teens interesting, you will enjoy the Trolley Days series of historical novels as they follow the lives of 4 young people growing up in that tumultuous era through good times and bad, hope and despair, love and loss. Readers young and old will be captivated by the world of their grandparents and great-grandparents, an era seemingly remote that nonetheless speaks to us across the generations. Trolley Days, The Dying Room, Noah's Raven, and Darkest Before Dawn are currently available in paperback and in several ebook formats. For more information, please visit www.trolleydays.net.